Imagine you're at a casual get-together with close friends, many of whom you've known for decades. Everyone is catching up, sharing stories about what's going on in their lives, when the conversation takes a familiar turn. Not necessarily a good turn, just a familiar turn. Your friend, let's call her Linda, starts expressing frustration about how she feels like she's always the one organizing these events and managing the household, while her husband Jim seems to be enjoying retirement without a care in the world. Linda's voice tightens as she says, "I'm just so tired of doing everything. I thought retirement was supposed to be relaxing." Another friend, Susan, immediately chimes in. "Linda, you've always been such a hard worker. Let me help you out next time. We'll plan the next gathering together." But Jim, overhearing the conversation, interjects with a defensive tone. "Well, maybe if you didn't always insist on doing things your way, you wouldn't be so stressed." Suddenly, the easygoing atmosphere was shifted. Linda feels overwhelmed and misunderstood. Susan offers to take on more responsibility, and Jim's comment only adds to Linda's frustration. You've just heard a familiar dynamic known as the drama triangle, a pattern many of us unknowingly fall into, even and perhaps especially in retirement. Welcome to my podcast on How Not to Retire, a psychological approach to a healthy and wealthy retirement. Episode 31, The Drama Triangle. Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer. In today's episode, which is going to be a little longer than previous ones, we're going to explore the drama triangle, a concept developed by Dr. Stephen Karpman in 1968. You might have heard this with the name the victim trap. They're both used interchangeably. But this is something very common, especially if you've been in any kind of addiction recovery, addiction work, support for addicts, any kind of therapy or coaching where this is brought up, because it's very common in families, it's very common in interactions. The model explains the common relationship dynamics that people will take on one of three, if not all three, roles called the victim, prosecutor, or rescuer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and slip into every now and then just say the person who's the victim or the person who's the persecutor. But the point being that I'll probably slip every now and then and just say the person who's the persecutor. What I mean to say is that the person playing the role of the persecutor, playing the role of the rescuer, playing the role of a victim. You are not a victim. You are not a rescuer. You are not a persecutor. You always just play the role of one. It's like you're on stage, right? And that's your persona. It's the stage mask you wear. It's the role you're playing, but it's not your best self. Even in retirement, we expect to enjoy more freedom, right? And less stress. But these dynamics will appear in our interactions with family, friends, and even within ourselves. The story I just shared, Linda played the role of the victim. She was feeling burdened and unappreciated. Susan played the role, and she stepped in as the rescuer, trying to solve Linda's problems for her by offering to help, right, or to do some of it. And then Jim, he became the persecutor, or played the role of the persecutor, criticizing Linda for how she managed things. Now, these roles may seem familiar, and they can create a cycle of blame, resentment, and frustration. And this is what's interesting. They almost always happen, and nobody's aware that it's happening. Now, it's interesting as I've taught my clients these ideas to name this, right? To name the behavior so we can tame the behavior. Now, when they come back and tell a story about what went on during the week, they're able to use language such as, okay, I lost my temper. I started playing the role of a victim. Man, that's powerful. And then what I ended up doing is once I got there and I realized that my mom was trying to rescue me again, I got real angry and I started playing the role of a persecutor. Beautiful. At least you're now aware, whereas before they were never aware. So we recognize, and we've said this many times on the podcast, retirement is seen as a time of relaxation and enjoyment, but it's going to bring new challenges in your relationships. Just the idea of the shift from working and then not working, the shift from having an identity as whatever it might be in your work to having no identity or no purpose. These shifts are going to lead to conflict, even contention and miscommunication. And maybe it's because the changing roles with your spouse, adjusting to new social dynamics, or figuring out how to balance independence with support. The drama triangle isn't just something that happens during stressful times at work or in the middle of raising a family. It's going to continue into retirement, where old patterns are going to persist or even get worse, intensify. Recognizing when you're falling into one of these roles is the first step, and it's the only really way you're going to ever break free from this cycle so you can foster a balance and healthy interactions. So now I'm going to explain a little bit about these roles. So as we move into or we navigate this idea called retirement, many of us expect a new chapter of freedom and relaxation. But it's common to experience relationship shifts leading to more tension or conflict. The drama triangle is going to sneak in, creating these unhealthy dynamics. So whether it's adjusting to a new routine with a spouse, reconnecting with old friends, or even dealing with family members, let's break down each of these three roles: victim, persecutor, and rescuer, and see how they might appear in the lives of retirees, in your life. Let's start with the role of the victim. The victim feels helpless, hopeless, powerless, overwhelmed, and burdened by circumstances. They often believe that life is happening to them and that they have little to no control over their situation. What are the characteristics of a victim? They feel they're being unfairly treated, misunderstood, or neglected. They could externalize the blame, thinking, well, why does this always happen to me? Which, notice the negative self-talk. No one appreciates everything I do, negative self-talk. No one knows what I'm going through. In fact, I'm the only one going through this kind of stress. Complete abdication of reality, and then it's a false narrative. In retirement, this could manifest when someone feels lost after leaving the workforce. It could be when your spouse or your children don't seem to understand their own needs or struggles, and they have no appreciation for what you're going through. The most common way this happens in retirement is not preparing for what is to come and staying on the same track of living without an awareness that retirement is really a bonus life. So each and every day becomes the same as yesterday, and it's then easy to slip into this drama triangle. So what are common phrases that we hear? Okay, well, I thought retirement was supposed to be relaxing, but I'm more stressed than ever. I've sacrificed so much, but no one seems to notice. And I always end up doing everything myself. So let me give you an example. Now, every single story that I'm going to share with you has happened at some point in time. I've just rearranged stuff, just thrown in fictitious names. So it'll be a continuum throughout this entire podcast. So we're going to take Tom. Tom recently retired after 35 years of work. He envisioned retirement as a time to enjoy hobbies and travel with his wife. But instead, he feels bored, purposeless. He often says to his friends, I thought retirement was going to be the best part of my life, but here I am, stuck at home, feeling like I don't matter anymore. Can you hear it in his voice? Can you see the role he's playing? Tom has unintentionally and unknowingly slipped into the drama triangle and into the role of a victim, feeling as though life has taken a wrong turn and waiting for someone to fix it or something to fix it. So what's the impact of playing the role of a victim? Well, the victim avoids responsibility for their own happiness. They often seek validation or a solution from others, and this can lead to a sense of helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness, and it's going to foster resentment towards others around them, maybe a spouse, maybe children or friends, and at that point in time, they're probably going to take on a new role called the persecutor. So let's define that. The persecutor is the one who's the judge. They have a judgmental and critical stance. They often blame others for problems. They maintain control by putting others down or asserting dominance. What are the characteristics? The persecutor's typically rigid, controlling, and quick to point fingers or criticize. In retirement, this is going to arise when someone feels that their spouse or family or perhaps society isn't living up to their expectations. They might also struggle with the loss of control that comes with leaving the workforce, and that's going to increase their level of frustration. What kind of things do persecutors say? You're always messing things up. If you had just done it my way, we wouldn't be in this mess. This is all your fault. Why did you do that? So here's an example. We're going to use Margaret in this case. Margaret's always been in charge of the household while her husband worked. And now that they're both retired, she feels frustrated that he doesn't contribute in the ways she wants him to. Margaret criticizes whenever he tries to help with chores. You never fold the laundry right. Why do I always have to redo everything? Her husband, feeling a bit belittled, begins to withdraw. And soon they find themselves in a cycle of tension. Now, what he's going to do is go into a man cave, and he's going to try to deflect. He's in a flight mode. She's going to increase and double down on her fight mode. She has taken on the role of the persecutor, using criticism to express her dissatisfaction, but it starts driving a wedge between her and her husband. Well, what impact is that going to have? The persecutor's behavior pushes others away. That's called collusion. It's going to create distance and defensiveness. Instead of solving any problem, the persecutor's harsh approach leads to more contention and isolation. This can be especially damaging in retirement because couples and family members will have more time together, and therefore it's going to amplify the dynamics. Now, when stuff like this happens, there's inevitably one of the people hanging around is going to play the role of a rescuer. And the rescuer's job is to save others, usually taking on responsibilities that are not theirs. They may feel the need to fix other people's problems, almost always at the expense of their own well-being. So what are the characteristics? The rescuer enjoys feeling needed and often overextends themselves to help others, even when it's not necessary or healthy. Rescuers are nice people. They have no boundaries. They want to be liked and needed, and they constantly manipulate conversations and situations so others give them a lot of affirmation, affection, and approval. And as mentioned before, the 3 A's, when you're constantly in search of the 3 A's into your 20s and later, you are in a compromised position and you're often codependent, and that is an addictive behavior. In retirement, many people find themselves taking on the rescuer role, especially with adult children or grandchildren, and even with their parents. They may also step in for a spouse, thinking that they're being helpful, but they end up fostering codependency and often resentment. What are the common phrases? Oh, don't worry about that. I've got it handled. I'll do everything. Or, you can't do it on your own. Let me take care of you. Or, I just want to help, even if it means putting myself last. So here's our example. We're going to use David and his wife Karen, who are both retired and have recently become grandparents. David loves spending time with his grandkids, but Karen, she's taken on the role of the rescuer, constantly stepping in to help their daughter with childcare, housework, and errands, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. When David tries to suggest they cut back and maybe enjoy more of their own free time, and what he's probably saying is, "Good, I'd like to have a little time with my wife as well," Karen says, "But they need us. If I don't help, everything will fall apart." There's the savior syndrome now just manifesting itself. Karen feels like she's doing the right thing by rescuing her daughter from the stresses of parenthood because she remembers what it was like for her as a young parent. But the challenge is that her child, then her daughter, never learns to be the best parent she could be. And at the same time, she's neglecting her own needs and her husband's needs and their retirement plan in the process. Being a rescuer has huge consequences. They often feel overburdened and unappreciated. Therefore, they will resent even the people they're trying to help. Remember, rescuers don't make friends. They take hostages. In retirement, this can lead to burnout and resentment, especially when the rescuer's efforts either go unnoticed, taken for granted, or unappreciated. Additionally, by always stepping in to save others, the rescuer may prevent those they help from growing or solving their own problems. In the case of their daughter, this is so true. And when these things happen, the rescuers become victims and eventually persecutors. Okay, so let's go over the roles one more time as a summary. As retirees or those approaching retirement, you might find yourself slipping into one or more of these roles, usually not aware of it, and I'm now introducing this so you'll start paying attention. So whether it's feeling like a victim of life's changes, taking on a persecutor's critical stance, constantly criticizing others when things don't go your way, or becoming the rescuer who's always there to fix things, who's always there to try to be liked, to be everybody's friend. These roles are exhausting, and they keep you stuck in unhealthy dynamics. So in this next little bit that we're going into now, we're going to explore how these roles interact and how they can create this cycle of frustration and contention. More importantly, we'll discuss how you can recognize when you're playing one of these roles and what steps you can take to break the cycle, fostering a healthier and more empowering relationship during your retirement years. All right, so how does the drama triangle play out? So we've broken down the individual roles within the triangle, victim, persecutor, and rescuer. Let's take a closer look at how these roles interact one with another. The real complexity of the drama triangle comes from the way people move between these roles, usually without realizing it, and how these shifts perpetuate unhealthy dynamics in relationships. This becomes especially relevant for pre-retirees and retirees who may experience significant life changes, prompting shifts in their relationships with spouses, family, friends, and even their own sense of self. And I oftentimes neglect to say, and their parents. This is a big one. Early in the retirement years, we're oftentimes taking care of our folks, right? Because they're still going through the last years of their life. So in retirement, when you have more time to spend with loved ones and fewer distractions like work or raising the kids, the roles of the drama triangle can become even more pronounced. Transitioning from work life to retirement can unsettle established patterns, leading to new or heightened conflicts. Let's explore how these roles interact, how people move between them, and how these dynamics can play out in real-life scenarios. So one of the most critical aspects of the drama triangle is that individuals shift, and they shift unknowingly. For example, a person who starts off as the victim, feeling powerless, helpless, and hopeless, might later become the persecutor, remember, playing the role of, lashing out in frustration. Similarly, the rescuer might start to feel overwhelmed and switch to the victim role when their efforts go unappreciated. This constant switching, and you can do it in a conversation, and you can be a victim with one person and a persecutor with another person, all within the same conversation. Rescuers, as they start to feel overwhelmed, they switch to a victim role, but yet they could be persecuting the other person while they're talking to them. This constant switching creates a cycle of tension and misunderstanding, which keeps the dynamic alive and toxic. So let's look at how this could take, in an example, what this might unfold like. We're going to now take a John and Helen. By the way, as I wrap things up in today's episode, I'm going to call back or recall these people. So try to remember what's going on in their space. So John and Helen, they recently retired. John was always the breadwinner, and Helen spent most of her time managing the household. Now that John is home all the time, he's feeling a bit lost without his job. No identity, right? No purpose. He takes on the role of the victim, saying stuff like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore, and I miss feeling useful. In other words, there was no preparation going into this. Helen, meanwhile, steps into the rescuer role, constantly trying to cheer him up or find new hobbies for him. Well, why don't we sign up for a class together? Or let me help you find some volunteer work. At first, Helen feels good about helping John. That's normal. She's a rescuer. She's getting her dopamine hit and a few other opioids that go along with it. But with time, if she continues to have to do it every time, and her happiness is contingent upon John being happy, who can never be happy because he's playing the role of a victim, she's going to start feeling like she's been taken for granted. She's been taken advantage of. because she continues to put her own interests on hold to focus on John's happiness. So then she begins to resent him for relying on her way too much. Without realizing it, Helen shifts from the rescuer to the persecutor role, snapping at John. Why can't you just figure out what you want to do on your own? I'm not your personal assistant. Well, how's John going to respond to that? Well, he's going to feel attacked. He's going to retreat further into the victim role, thinking, well, I can't do anything right. No one understands how hard this retirement transition for me is. And then the cycle is going to continue, with each of them stuck in their respective roles, unable to communicate or break free from the triangle. So another typical setting is where the drama triangle plays out for retirees at a family gathering, a family reunion, Thanksgiving, Christmas time. Okay, we're going with Linda and George. They're hosting a holiday dinner with their children and grandchildren. Linda has spent the entire day preparing the meal and ensuring everything is perfect. Does this sound familiar? She's feeling exhausted, but she doesn't say anything. Instead, she quietly slips into the victim role, thinking, man, no one ever helps me. I have to do everything myself, and I've been doing this for 30 years. George, noticing her tension, steps into the rescuer role by saying, why don't you sit down, Linda? I'll take over from here. Now, on the surface, this appears to be very sweet, a very loving husband. He's recognizing that. But instead of feeling relieved, Linda feels even more frustrated. She snaps at George. You always wait until the last minute to help. Everything's done. At this moment, Linda shifts from the victim role to the persecutor role, criticizing George on his timing. Well, George, who was trying to help, now feels unappreciated and hurt, and that's a common pattern. Now, I'm not defending either side, but if this has been going on for 30 years, how does George always time it so he asks to help his wife after the work is done? So if you were a guest in this home, and you see the husband getting up and saying, let me help you right now, why don't you sit down? But what you don't see is 30 years of built-up frustration, all penned up inside of her, that he times it so perfectly that he really doesn't have to do anything. Now, that could be subconscious or it could be cognitive. Either way, it's still not helping. And then he comes in like he's the rescuer, and that's a feigned awareness of what he could do. So, George is trying to help. He feels unappreciated, so he says, I can never do anything right, no matter what I do. It's not good enough. Notice the rescuer's position, and notice he turning into a victim. Now, he's playing the role of a victim, and when he does that, by the way, he actually starts playing a little bit of the role of the persecutor. So he started out as the rescuer, finds himself playing the role of a victim, and the more angry he gets, even if he goes into his man cave. Inside of a man cave, when you're not talking to anyone, when you're freezing them out, you're playing the role of the persecutor because you're persecuting them by shutting them down. That makes sense. I hope that's connecting. Linda continues to criticize, and then she's really double downing on the persecutor. It'll get to the point where they can both be playing dueling persecutors, dueling victims, with George always at the role of the rescuer, right? Okay. The children watching this dynamic unfold, and I'm guaranteeing you it will not be the first time this has happened. They perhaps would step in as rescuers, offering to help clean up or trying to diffuse the tension. Well, they also have seen this go on for their entire life. Why are they now picking up so late in the story? Unless someone starts recognizing the underlying roles at play, the family will always remain stuck in this pattern, and this will resurface continually at family get-togethers, family reunions, each person feeling misunderstood, unappreciated, or attacked. The children will learn the system. They'll become experts at playing the roles of the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer as well, and that will then creep into their marriage. They will then teach their children how to do it, and then they will have grandchildren. So this dysfunctional behavior continues going on. Notice how the drama triangle becomes self-sustaining. Each role feeds into the others. The victim seeks validation or rescue. The rescuer feels compelled to help, regardless if it's needed or not, and the persecutor maintains control through criticism or blame. Each person's behavior reinforces the other's roles, keeping the triangle in motion. So, for example, the victim may feel powerless and project that helplessness outward, prompting a rescuer to step in and take over. Just a side note, I got to remember where I am here. Many of the times I'm in a coaching scenario with couples, it's because a rescuer will marry a victim, or a rescuer and a victim will marry a persecutor. It's like they have targets on their head. They need to marry that person, or they seek that person out subconsciously so they can get their opioid hit for living up to their false narratives that I'm no good, or I'm always helpless, I'm always powerless, I'm always no way I can do anything right, I'm not good enough. We live in a self-fulfilling prophecy when we jump into these roles and we cannot see how to get out of these roles. Okay, so let me get back to where I was. So if the rescuer feels unappreciated, they can quickly become resentful and shift into the persecutor role. This then causes the original victim to feel attacked, further solidifying their sense of helplessness. The persecutor, meanwhile, justifies their criticism by believing they're pushing the victim to improve, but in reality, they're perpetuating the cycle, and it can become a bit of bullying. Retirement is supposed to be a time of transition. That's what's supposed to happen. But with that comes the potential for increased stress, especially in relationships. Spouses suddenly spending more time together may revert to these roles without realizing it. And in fact, most of these roles already existed from childhood and are played out again in our waning years. Sometimes we carry these maladaptive behaviors into our marriages, and with time, they progressively worsen. And often we don't realize or have the awareness to know what we're doing. Similarly, retirees with adult children may find the need to rescue their children by offering constant unsolicited advice or help, only to find themselves feeling resentful when their efforts aren't appreciated. Well, a key component there, this is something to be aware of. If your conversations with your children are constantly of the unsolicited advice form, your role of playing rescuer is an identity crisis, because you're wanting to go back to the point that what you have to say is something that they have to listen to and act upon when they don't. They probably had your unsolicited advice for 20 years and now they can't wait to not have it anymore. But when you continually give it to them, you're going to first be rescuer, then you're going to feel like a victim, and eventually you're going to persecute her with certain cries for help and the way you complain about not being visited. Well, hell, they don't want to visit you because all you've ever done is either rescued them, played the role of a victim, or persecuted them. That's what's going on in the dynamics with a lot of these families when the grandparents are constantly screaming out, crying out, and guilt leveraging for people to visit them. That's because the drama triangle has been at play this entire time. All right, so what's the emotional toll of this drama triangle in retirement? Well, it's going to be significant. You are already dealing with other challenges, adjusting to this new sense of identity after you leave the workforce, managing health issues, navigating changing family dynamics. But when you're constantly cycling between a victim, persecutor, and rescuer, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to feel isolated, and you're going to be resentful, and you're going to be resented, making it more difficult to enjoy the freedom and relaxation that retirement, this bonus part of life, is supposed to bring. Okay, so for example, someone who frequently plays the victim might struggle with the feelings of loneliness and helplessness. Well, I'm guaranteeing you they do. Thinking that life's passed them by, or life mistreated you or mistreated me, I'll be the victim now. On the other hand, a persecutor is going to experience guilt or regret over the harshness of their words. But they feel trapped in their role because they have to keep everything in order. People who are persecutors, bullies, if you will, or constant critics, they start picking up, as a general rule, they pick up that they're really jerks. But they don't know how to get out of jerk mode. It's something they don't know how to escape from. So at the end of today's podcast, I'm going to give you ways to get out of jerk mode. It's really helpful if you can, because the people want to be around you. Your loved ones want to be around you. But if all they know you is in jerk mode or rescue mode or victim mode, well, why the hell do they want to spend any time with you? That's something to consider. So let's break the cycle. Recognizing that you're stuck or caught in the drama triangle is the first step toward breaking free from it. Once you know the roles and how they interact, you can change your behavior and shift toward healthier, more empowering dynamics. Instead of feeling like a victim, now try to remember these words now. Instead of feeling like a victim, take ownership of your circumstances and become a creator, looking for solutions rather than problems. Victims only see problems. They don't ever approach it from solution-based. Okay, next. Instead of being a persecutor, you can become a challenger, offering feedback without blame, problem finding instead of problem solving, asking open-ended questions. The intelligence of a human being is not found in answers. It's found in questions. Being present, seeking to understand. And instead of being a rescuer, you can adopt the role of a coach, supporting others while allowing them to take responsibility for their own choices. So I'm going to summarize that again. Move from victim to creator, persecutor to challenger, and rescuer to coach. In our final section here, we're going to explore these empowerment roles and provide some practical steps to give you some idea of how to escape, move out of the drama triangle and into a more positive, fulfilling relationship in your retirement. All right. We know how easy it is to slip into these roles, right? Victim, persecutor, and rescuer. Now let's break free. The good news is that by becoming aware of the roles that we play, only then can we start shifting towards more empowering ways of interacting with others. Instead of being stuck in these toxic cycles, let's cultivate healthier, more productive dynamics that foster growth, understanding, and respect. Dr. Stephen Karpman, remember, he's the one who developed the idea of the drama triangle. And again, it's also called the victim trap, something along those lines. Later introduced an alternative framework called the empowerment triangle. This offers positive roles to replace the unhealthy ones in the drama triangle. So I'm going to repeat them again. Instead of victim, become a creator. Instead of persecutor, you're a challenger. Instead of a rescuer, become a coach. Each role encourages healthy, empowering behavior and promotes personal responsibility, mutual respect, and growth in your relationships. Okay, let's explore each role in depth, particularly in the context of pre-retirees and retirees, and how adopting these roles can transform your relationships and improve your overall well-being in retirement and during the retirement years. Okay, creator. The definition of a creator is the empowered counterpart to the victim. Instead of seeing yourself as powerless and at the mercy of external forces, woe is me, helpless, hopeless, and powerless, the creator takes ownership of their life and your choices. So if you're taking ownership over what's going on, you don't need to play the woe is me card. You focus on solutions rather than problems. Be a problem finder instead of a problem solver. Look for opportunities to grow and learn from your experiences. So when you do that, when you problem find, you first have to see the problem and then solve the correct problem. Then you become a problem solver. What are the characteristics of a creator? All right. If you're a creator, you see challenges as opportunities for personal growth and development. You take responsibility for your happiness, joy, and well-being, rather than relying on others to fix them for you, or complaining that no one ever cares, or no one ever sees it your way, or no one ever helps you. Well, help yourself. Just move forward. How can you solve that problem? And that's what a creator does. I'm coming up with ideas. Instead of saying, why does this always happen to me? The creator says, what can I do to change the situation? And another one I really like is, What can I learn from this situation? All right, now let's go back to our earlier conversation or story about a guy named Tom. Remember, Tom is the retiree who felt bored and purposeless after leaving his job. So initially, Tom slipped into the role of a victim. He believed that retirement wasn't what he had hoped, and he had lost his identity. Then he put on the creator hat, right? After some reflection, he decided to embrace this construct called creator or creator role. He started exploring new hobbies and even signed up for a community class on photography, something he'd always wanted to learn, but never had the time for. He probably did, but remember, in victim mindset, you don't just all of a sudden develop the role of a victim mindset in retirement. You've had it your whole life. You were probably taught it by your parents and perhaps even their parents. So you probably had time during the years, Tom did, during his earlier years, but he chose not to. So instead of feeling sorry for himself, Tom realizes that, you know what? I have the power to do what I want with my activities in my retirement years. And I want to do activities that's going to give me joy and fulfillment. So what is the impact of having that creator mindset? Well, he gets to take charge of his retirement. He gets to adopt the creator role rather than focusing on what he's lost, the job, sense of purpose, identity, structure, routine. Tom can now focus on what he wants to create, whether it's a new hobby, a new friendship, a new opportunity, rebuilding a relationship, working with his kids, his grandkids. The creator mindset fosters a sense of empowerment and opens the door to personal growth. It doesn't matter the age. This idea of you can't teach an old dog new tricks is a victim mentality saying. Victims have been saying that for decades. It's just not true. Okay, next, challenger role. The challenger replaces the persecutor role. Unlike the persecutor who criticizes and blames, the challenger constructively holds others to higher standards. They provide feedback that encourages growth rather than tearing others down. They ask good questions, exploratory questions. They seek to understand, and they seek to help the others understand. Challengers aim to inspire, to motivate others to be their best selves, while maintaining respect for self, respect for others, and overall empathy. What are the characteristics? Challengers confront issues directly, but respectfully and compassionately. They don't beat around the bush. They're able to get to it straight ahead. They encourage others to be responsible for their own actions. Well, first of all, they help them find the problem. And then collectively, they delegate to the person they're working with the solutions. This is very challenging to do, but oh my gosh, is it powerful. So rather than blaming or criticizing, a challenger will ask, how can we approach this problem? What don't we know that if we knew would make a difference? What are some ideas that we need to have for us to solve this problem? Okay, so let's go back to Margaret. Remember, Margaret was one who played the role of a persecutor by criticizing her husband for not helping around the house. Margaret decides to shift into challenger role, all right? Instead of snapping at him for not folding the laundry correctly, she sits down with him and she says, I really appreciate that you're helping out, but I wonder how we could benefit from working together in a way that makes things easier. What do you think about dividing the chores based on what we each truly enjoy? Now, that's just an example. Now, I've already done a number of communication segments in this podcast series that would fit beautifully into that role that Margaret was playing as the challenger. By adopting this role, Margaret can constructively address her frustrations, focusing on collaboration versus criticism. This opens a healthy communication and mutual respect. So instead of blaming or belittling others for their shortcomings, a challenger will always encourage growth and problem finding and problem solving. In retirement, when couples and families spend more time together, this role can be especially useful in preventing contention and fostering a more harmonious home environment. Let's wrap things up with the coach. The definition of a coach, remember the coach is the counterpart to the rescuer. The definition is someone who swoops in to save others, that's the rescuer, usually at their own expense, they have no boundaries. Well, then coach empowers others to solve their own problems. A coach provides guidance, support, and encouragement, but ultimately allows others to solve the problem, to take responsibility for their own choices. A coach delegates the learning process. This is called teaching instead of telling, right? The characteristics of a coach? The coach asks questions that helps others discover their solutions rather than providing all the answers. They support others without taking over or assuming responsibility for the problems. Instead of saying, hey, let me fix this for you, the coach asks, what do you think you can do to address this situation? Now, let's go back to Karen. Karen was playing the role of a rescuer by taking on the responsibilities for her adult daughter. Remember, the adult daughter and was trying to raise the child? And Karen was always rescuing the daughter, not giving her a chance to be a young mom. So Karen then decides to shift into the coach role. Instead of constantly stepping in to babysit her grandchildren or run errands for her daughter, Karen started having more open conversations. She asked her daughter, well, what kind of support do you want from me? What do you need from me? How can I help without taking on too much myself and still be respectful of your father and the time we have together? She also encouraged her daughter to find solutions for her family rather than relying on Karen to do all the solving. By adopting the coach role, Karen can provide support without overextending herself, and her daughter then becomes more self-reliant and confident in managing her responsibilities. Well, what's the impact? The coach role is particularly valuable for retirees who may feel pulled into family dynamics where they're expected to rescue others. This also includes your parents. By shifting to the coach role, retirees can still offer support and guidance, but in a way that empowers others to take ownership for their challenges. This helps prevent burnout and fosters healthier, more independent relationships. So how does this overall help us in retirement? By adopting the roles of creator, challenger, and coach, it can dramatically improve the quality of life, your quality of life. These roles promote self-awareness, personal responsibility, and healthy communication, all essential for maintaining fulfilling relationships and a sense of purpose. Now, going back to the research from earlier segments, this will enhance quality of life, longevity of life, your immune system, your sleeping, almost everything that you're consistently worried about as you age. This will improve, slow down the aging process. For retirees, embracing these empowerment roles, and here are the following 4 benefits. Enhance relationships. I've already mentioned this to some degree. I'm going to expand it a bit. By breaking free from the toxic roles of the drama triangle, you're going to foster stronger, more supportive relationships with your spouse, family, friends, parents. Instead of being stuck in this cycle of blame and resentment, you'll create a dynamic where everyone feels respected and valued. And by the way, this comes with practice. Just because you hear it tonight doesn't mean you're going to get it. This is going to require a little bit of practice on everything. Increase personal fulfillment. So again, shifting from victim to creator, it's going to allow you to be in charge of your retirement. Rather than feeling bored or dissatisfied, you can seek out activities and opportunities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Prevent burnout. By moving from the rescuer to the coach role, you can still support loved ones, but you don't have to take on more than you can handle. You get to protect your boundaries. This prevents feelings of exhaustion and resentment and encourages others to take responsibility for their own lives. Foster growth. As a challenger, you can inspire those around you to grow and improve while holding yourself to higher standards. This role promotes mutual respect and constructive problem finding and constructive problem solving. These are essential for a peaceful, fulfilling retirement. Okay, 5 practical steps. Here we go. 1, self-awareness. The first step in shifting to empowerment roles is to know that you're in the drama triangle. Pay attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your words. Are you feeling helpless? Victim. Are you criticizing others? Persecutor. Are you overextending yourself? Are you saving someone? No boundaries. Rescuer. Be aware. Give it a name. If you can name it, you can tame it. Number 2, pause and reflect. When you notice you're slipping into one of the drama triangle roles, stop. Think about it. Give it a name and ask yourself, how can I approach this differently? What role do I want to play? 3, shift your mindset. So remember, self-awareness, be aware. Notice what you're doing. Reflect, stop, and then redirect your mind. Oh, no, I want to be a challenger, for example, in this one. I want to be a creator in this one, or I want to be a coach. Just have it. And you can even put it on a 3x5 card. Put your little notes there. Okay, shift your mindset. Instead of reacting out of habit, which you're used to, the traditional way of doing it, consciously choose to adopt one of the empowerment roles. So if you're feeling like a victim, ask yourself, what can I create in this situation? If you're tempted to criticize, and most of us are, think about how you could constructively challenge the other person. Or if you're ready to rescue, no boundaries, step back and consider how you can coach them. Number 4, practice effective communication. Work on your communication skills to support these new roles. For example, ask open-ended questions as a coach. Provide better questions as a challenger. The key is to approaching conversations with empathy. Remember, empathy means you know what they're going through from their perspective, nothing to do with your bias. Empower others by encouraging them to find their own solutions. That is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is essential, particularly for those who are prone to the rescuer's role. So let's summarize it. By understanding the negative patterns of the drama triangle and the impact these roles have on your relationships, you, as a retiree or a pre-retiree, can start the shift towards a more constructive and fulfilling retirement experience. The key to breaking free from the cycle of victim, persecutor, and rescuer is to embrace creator, challenger, and coach. So, final summary. Creator. Rather than feeling helpless, powerless, and hopeless, or stuck in the victim mindset, you take ownership. Challenger. Instead of constant critic, blaming others like a persecutor, you become a challenger. Encourage growth. Provide excellent questions to help someone figure out the solutions. And coach. Instead of being a rescuer, provide support without taking over. Shifting into these empowerment roles can transform interactions, prevent unhealthy dynamics, and create a more rewarding and balanced retirement. I know this has been a long segment, but I hope that you've gotten something out of it. It might be helpful to go back and listen to it a few times. There is so much information here. This is years and years of research that I was able to put together and provide. Just because we're more seasoned doesn't mean we don't have these challenges. Retirement is a bonus part of life because we can heal from decades-old dysfunctional behavior and become our best selves. Remember, instead of trying harder or sticking to old patterns, try something different, grounded in timeless, universal principles. Face your challenges with an open mind, making adjustments while working persistently towards your best self.